Welcome to the We as Nature podcast, where inspiring visionaries share their personal stories of living in alignment with the more than human world, and how this informs their unique contribution to cultivating a flourishing future for life on Earth. Each month, We as Nature features a new storyteller, sharing their experience of how listening to and learning from diverse forms of life has altered their course. The power of story lies within each of us, offering a portal to the language of the heart, connecting us to our feelings as a source of inspiration and courage from which we can act. For those of us seeking to create a flourishing world, starting right where we are, these We as Nature stories offer a space to listen, contemplate, and envision new possibilities. We as Nature is brought to you by Flourishing Diversity, and you can find out more about who we are and what we do at the end of the episode, as well as in the show notes. In today's episode, you're in for a treat. Regenerative economist Della Duncan not only shares her own deeply engaging story, but offers a simple and beautiful meditation, as well as a thoughtful invitation into a personal exploration of living in right livelihood, whilst unpacking what this means. Della is a senior fellow of social and economic equity at the International Inequalities Institute in the London School of Economics. She's a founding member of the Donut Economics California Coalition and is linked to various other educational institutes as a fellow and instructor. Through her work, Della helps transition businesses towards a regenerative economy. She facilitates Work That Reconnects workshops, and as a Right Livelihood coach, she supports individuals to better align their values with their work. Della is also the host of the Upstream podcast, which challenges mainstream economic thinking through documentaries and conversations. In her story, Della shares the journey that led her to apply teachings from Buddhism to practical approaches for addressing the root causes of the most challenging issues of our time. Before Della begins, we'll leave an intentional 10-second pause for you to settle into your surroundings. Wherever you are, take a few moments to observe the space you're in. Notice your breath and how it's moving in your body. Whether you're sitting, standing, or walking, become aware of any points of contact between your body and the chair or your feet and the ground beneath you. Start to drop your awareness down into your body. Allow your mind, your heart, and your ears to open as you move towards a space of listening.
Imagine that you're standing on the bank of a river and you see someone float by who's struggling. They're drowning. So what do? You jump in. You dive in to save them, to pull them to shore, to bring them off the water and into the land. That pretty soon you look up and you see more people floating down the river. They too are drowning. So you jump in to save them too. Eventually, there's so many people floating down the river drowning that you call for help. You get others involved. And eventually, some of you have to go upstream to figure out, why is everyone falling in the first place? So this may sound like a pretty dramatic metaphor, and it is. I first heard it when I was working as a rape crisis counselor in San Jose, California, which was my first job after college. And I heard it to tell the importance of not just supporting survivors of sexual violence on the hotline and in crisis calls and in court cases, but to go upstream to explore, why does violence happen and how could we prevent violence from happening in our community? So I heard this upstream metaphor and I was really touched by it, really inspired by that mode of thinking, that journey upstream to root causes. And while I was working there, as you can imagine, the work was challenging. It was very difficult. It was very hard to work with survivors of sexual violence. And yet, what was even more heartbreaking, what really touched me and felt very heartbreaking at the time, was widening and rising inequality around me. So, this sense that the work that we were doing as rape crisis counselors didn't have much value in the economy that we were embedded in. There were differences in our pay scale, but also between industries. Located right in Silicon Valley, I was feeling this discrepancy of value assigned to our work. I was also feeling concerned with displacement of friends, folks who had had to move out of their communities due to rising costs, and also a sense of folks who I knew, including my dad, wanting to do work that was meaningful and that they cared about. My dad always wanted to be a writer, and yet having a really hard time doing that work because being a writer doesn't pay very much. So I was very touched by and heartbroken by rising inequality and by discrepancies of income and ability to actualize one's potential. So I embarked on a journey from that moment, going upstream, to look at our current economic system and why it assigns value to some work and not others, and also in relationship with the environment, how it assigns value to nature and the environment, and what's important, what's valuable, what's progress, what's development, right? So all of these questions guided me on this beginning of a journey upstream. So from that journey, I embarked on it, looking at economics and the root causes of the ecological, social, and economic challenges we face. And I've met many wonderful mentors and friends and colleagues along the way. And one of them most dear to my heart, one of most impactful to my understanding on this upstream journey, has been Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy is a Buddish eco-justice philosopher and activist. She's just over the bay from where I am now in San Francisco. She's in Berkeley, and she's 93 years old. And she's the root teacher of something called the Work That Reconnects. And I had the good fortune of attending a mindfulness retreat. I thought it was a very typical, classic mindfulness retreat, and it wasn't. I walked in and met my roommate for the retreat, and they said, "Don't you just love Joanna?" And I was like, who's Joanna? Didn't know who the teachers were. I was very new to the mindfulness practice. And they said, "Oh, Joanna's amazing. You're going to have a wonderful time." And it was in that retreat that I first became introduced and invited into practices of ecological spirituality and engaged Buddhism or engaged spirituality. So I had this real sense of being kicked off the cushion and having to utilize mindfulness and compassion practice and my spiritual journey for the web of life, for the betterment of all living beings, both people and the natural world. And there were many different ways that invitation or that kick happened. One of them is through these very real embodied practices that Joanna offers through the Work That Reconnects. So, for example, I had this experience with a partner at this retreat of being led around a beautiful garden with my eyes closed. So I had my eyes closed and I was being led around this beautiful garden. And at different times, I would get to touch things and feel things and smell things in the garden. The bay leaves, the feeling of the oak bark, the smell of the soil. I would get to experience this with my eyes closed, really awakening all of my senses. And then at very perfect moments, my partner would say, "Open your eyes and look in the mirror. Open your eyes and look in the mirror." And I would be invited to open my eyes. And I truly had an experience of looking into the mirror, whether it was looking up at the sky and seeing the clouds, or looking at a tree or a plant or an insect. I had this very real experience of feeling as though I was looking into a mirror. Later, I'd find that this sensation, this feeling that I had could be called an experience of the ecological self, of a deeper understanding, of a knowing that we are nature. And so I was given these opportunities, these very embodied practices of feeling a sense of ecological self, of interconnectedness with all that is. And so Joanna and this work was very crucial in this journey upstream, looking at value and how it's assigned and how we make sense of meaning and connection and who we think we are as humans, and particularly in our relationship with nature. So I found on that journey upstream, really largely thanks to Joanna Macy, that a lot of the challenges we face today, and maybe as you're listening, you can cultivate those things that break your heart. Maybe there's ecological or social or political challenges that you're really holding dear in your heart right now. That when we go upstream from them, one of the things we may find is supremacies, is power over, is times when we've felt or folks have felt that they're dominated over, or they're more than, they have more value than, they are better than, right? We understand this in racism. We understand this in patriarchal supremacy, in anthropocentrism, so human domination over nature, in capitalism, capital supremacy over workers and labor. So we have all these vehicles of supremacy that we could see. And we can see that then as if it floats downstream to the problems that we see and that we feel into and that we care about. If we go even further upstream than that, one of the things that I'm sensing or feeling, and I've really received from teachers like Joanna, are separation, right? In order to dominate over or have supremacy over, we have to be separate from, we have to see ourselves as separate from. In economics, I remember as I studied in my undergraduate degree, we had this idea of us as humans as homo economicus, that we as humans are rational, self-interested beings, that we are separate from nature, that we can use nature for our use and exploitation and commodification, but also that we are separate from one another. And in fact, that it is our self-maximization, it is our self-utility, it is our individualization and a maximization and meeting of our own needs. It's actually good for the economy. That's actually seen as good for the economy for each and every one of us to act in our own self-interest in terms of mainstream economic thinking. So this separation point, whether it's separate of ourselves from our higher calling or sense of purpose or sense of right livelihood, but also our sense of connection with one another, whether it's that separation there or our separation with the more than human world, with the web of life. So I came to know that the work that reconnects and that first retreat experience and now carrying that work forward offers a chance for reconnection. So both in practices like that mirror walk that I referenced, that open your eyes and look in the mirror, but also in other ways like a web of life meditation. So I was given the experience, and I offer this to you now listening, that if you can imagine that you are interconnected, you have a strand of light connecting your heart with each and every heart of those other folks listening, each and every heart of those in your surrounding around you, all the animal beings, the plant beings, the insect beings, the web, the winged, the four-legged, also the people. And then stretching these strands of light, connecting your heart to each and every heart around the globe, so that we can see in our mind's eye, in our moral imagination, that we are interconnected as in a web of life. So I received this visualization, which I now offer to you, of strands of light connecting your heart, my heart, to each and every heart around the beautiful planet that we're on, that we're in. And that sensation has given me so much of a sense of strength and power and connectedness. I truly can say to you that I do not feel alone. I do not feel loneliness or aloneness, because I really have cultivated and kept this visualization that I am interconnected as in a web of life. And even when I feel the deepest, darkest despair or really heartbreak, I feel like I can rest in to that web of life sensation and feel into that interconnectedness. And I can sense into the joy and the the love coming in through the web of life, as well as the pain and the heartbreak and the suffering. And so Joanna would say, there is nowhere you can go where you are not held in this web of life. There is nowhere you can go where you are not held in this web of life. So on this journey, going from being a rape crisis counselor, hearing this upstream metaphor, traveling upstream to what are the root causes of the ecological and economic and social challenges of our time, I found the supremacy, the domination over, then the separation from, and there I've come to the antidotes, the offerings of reconnection. So the work that reconnects being one of them, but this sensation of being connected in a web of life. Zen master, late great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh would say interbeing, right? We inter-are. That's another way of saying this, that we can see our interconnectedness with all that is. When we breathe out oxygen, a tree breathes in and breathes out back to us, and we're sharing in reciprocity and widening circles of reciprocity with those animal and plant and human beings around us. So sensing into this reconnection, this connection has helped me then with that upstream challenge to share out. And also along that journey, Joanna, who I mentioned, is a Buddish philosopher and activist. It led me to Naropa University, which is a Buddhist university in Colorado in the United States. And there I had another powerful experience of being on a walk with a Buddhist nun from Korea. It was a dialogue walk, just as we're listening now, just as you are listening now. We walked together listening to one another. And we got to share just our own sense of how we were doing on our livelihood journeys and what was coming up for us, where we were feeling called, just making sense of our contributions to the flourishing of all life on the planet. And it was on that walk with the Buddhist nun and thinking about economics that I said, well, what about Buddhist economics? What about Buddhist economics? Could that be a thing? Is that a thing? Is this something that people have connected, taking these ideas like interbeing or our interconnectedness and merging that with our sense of economic system making and meeting of our needs, but being in relation with the planetary needs. And the person next to me, the Buddhist nun, said, well, have you heard of E.F. Schumacher? So E.F. Schumacher was a development economist in the 70s who had a very profound experience. He went to Burma and he was meant to help Burma develop in the classic sense, growth, development in the very classic sense. So more goods and services, more material well-being and material wealth. And while he was there, he had a transformative experience where he really saw that folks were living quite differently, that they had a paradigm or worldview that was quite different than his own. He found that folks there, in his experience, were trying to be happier with less and less. There was a renunciation, a simplicity, an elegant simplicity to their way of being. And he was very inspired by this. And so this led him, as a fellow regenerative renegade economist, to question mainstream economic thinking that he was taught and the tools that he had been given, tools like development, progress, and growth. So in those interrogations, he wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Matter. And as part of that, he has a chapter on Buddhist economics. So finding my way through this Buddhist nun to E.F. Schumacher is what led me to Schumacher College. So Schumacher College, named after E.F. Schumacher, founded by Satish Kumar, a former Jain monk from India, really amazing person who has traveled around the world on a pilgrimage for peace without any money. He's actually written a book called Elegant Simplicity, as well as many others. He really gave to us the opportunity of the connecting the spiritual, the ecological, and the economic. The degree that I did there and then later taught on was economics for transition, transitioning us to more regenerative, more ecologically just, sustainable, equitable economic systems and realities. So that's where I learned more about the systems thinking and the economics behind the transition, going very far upstream to an economics of connection, an economics of solidarity, of collaboration, and of revaluing that which is really, truly important, the wealth of the natural world, the wealth of community, of friendship, of connection. So that place has been very inspiring to me and has really helped me on my regenerative economics journey. And it was there that I really dove into the concept and the frame of right livelihood. So right livelihood. So right livelihood, the idea really helped me make sense of that moment with Joanna Macy, where I felt kicked off the cushion, where mindfulness had once been more to regulate my own anxiety or my own physical experience. It now was kicked off the cushion into a path of engaged spiritual activism. And the right livelihood frame, coming from Buddhist economics or from Buddhism, is an invitation to see our work as part of our contribution to the flourishing of the planet, and to see our work as part of our spiritual path. So that work can be a part of our spiritual path and also can be a part of that economic systems change that we so need to be able to create regenerative and equitable and just communities. So my understanding of right livelihood is that it's not just what we do for money. It's not just what we do as our job. It's all the ways that we contribute to a flourishing world. So our right livelihood can also include, besides our paid work, it can also include our parenting, right? Many of you listening are likely parents, maybe even grandparents, and that work that you do, raising future generations, caring for them, teaching them, guiding them, is work. So seeing that as part of your right livelihood journey, as well as the care work for our elders, for those of us who have parents or folks with differing abilities that we care for. That too is work. Our art making is work. It's an offering. It's a contribution to a flourishing planet. We want a flourishing planet of more creativity and diversity of creation. So our art making is also part of our right livelihood journey, as is our activism. So our activism, our volunteering, and all of that work as well. So hearing this frame of right livelihood, upon graduation from Schumacher College, we received the invitation to not get a job, but to cultivate a right livelihood. Satish Kumar said, I don't want you to get a job. I want you to cultivate a right livelihood. And that moment, I really felt a sense of stepping into flow. I felt a sense that there was a river that was right livelihood, and I stepped into it, and I relaxed and released control, and I felt into the web of life and being held by it and the sense of trust, and I just started to flow. And since that time, it's felt a lot like flow, this right livelihood path of saying yes to where I feel I'm needed or where I could be contributing. Sometimes it's paid, sometimes it's not, but a real sense of trust in the universe and a sense of stepping into flow. This has been my experience of my right livelihood journey. So I want to offer some invitations to you listening. Deeply, deeply grateful for your presence and attention and for witnessing and hearing that which I'm offering here. So my invitations to you. One quote that I love about right livelihood, or one frame, one way of thinking about this. If you're thinking to yourself, well, what is my right livelihood? Or maybe this is a new frame or new idea for you. There's an idea that is inspired by Frederick Buechner. This idea that our right livelihood is the place where the world's deepest hunger meets our deepest gladness, where the world's deepest hunger meets your deepest gladness. So where is that point for you? So for me, the world's deepest hunger, that which broke my heart, that which made me ache, that which I really cared or wanted to contribute to, is inequality. Inequality and differentiation of valuing our labor and our sense of being humans and our contributions to a flourishing planet. So that has been my heartbreak. What is yours? What is that place in the world that breaks your heart? What's happening on this planet or in this planet that breaks your heart? And then where does that meet your deepest gladness? So where do you come alive? Where do you thrive? Where do you find joy? Where do you step into flow? So this is an idea Howard Thurman said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and do it, because what the world needs is more people who are alive, right? So it's that merging of that which we care about, but also that which we love and that enlivens us, and where we find flow and contribution, and where do those places meet? So I offer that if that's a useful idea of thinking of what is your right livelihood calling and where are you at on your right livelihood journey. Secondly, for that topic or issue that you care about that breaks your heart, I invite you to try on the upstream metaphor. Just see where that takes you. What happens when you go upstream from that which breaks your heart, whether it's an ecological or political or social or economic challenge of our time? What are the root causes of that? And what does that root cause journey aid for you or help for you in your own contribution to that? What does that look like? The journey of supremacy and separation and then reconnection and collaboration is one journey, but maybe yours looks different. And I'd be delighted to hear the plethora, the flourishing diversity of journeys that people take when they go upstream. And then finally, the last invitation, I just want to give again the gift of the sensation, the embodied feeling that you are part of the web of life, that you are interconnected, and that every act of ours with good intention will send out ripple effects into the web of life that we may never even be able to measure or even see. So even just being here together, presencing this concept of flourishing diversity, listening, receiving, connecting, we are contributing to the web of life. So wherever you go, you are held by the web of life. I wish that image for you, if it's useful for you to try on and to carry with you. Thank you so much for listening.
A huge thank you to Della for sharing her story and for the journey she invited us on with her. And thank you for being here. If you want to find out more about Della's work and the Upstream podcast she hosts, you can find links to everything in the show notes. And one final request. If you liked what you heard in this episode, you can help others hear it by spreading the word. If you feel called to leave us a review, this is also an excellent way to help other people discover the We as Nature podcast. The We as Nature podcast is recorded live during an online gathering where each month a new guest shares their story and attendees enjoy the opportunity to connect with other listeners. You can find a link to our upcoming We as Nature live events, which are free to attend, in the show notes. We as Nature is brought to you by Flourishing Diversity, an initiative bringing together voices from all over the world to explore humanity's interconnection with the lands, waters, forests, and fellow species. Flourishing Diversity is a path towards a vibrant future and offers a collective approach in response to climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. We create spaces to listen to and learn from all life, raise critical questions, search for alternative answers, and amplify generative biocultural practices. You can register to receive updates and inspiration from us at flourishingdiversity.com, as well as finding us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks for being here, and we hope you'll join us again soon.